today. Get this up on haiku for them. All right, so we're going to start here. All I want you to draw right now, okay, is you can draw your circle and the axis. So everybody draw a circle and an axis. Okay. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to label some things on the circle. Well, actually, we're going to draw. So we know the first thing we know is we talk about our signs, right? And we know that that means all students take calculus. So all are positive, sine and cosine, or sine and cosecant are positive, tangent, cotangent positive, cosine, and secant are positive. So that's a good mnemonic. It's good to just put it on there so you know which ones are going to get positives and negatives. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to fill in your over 4 lines. So split each one of those in half. And we're going to label all the pi's over 4. Okay, we're going to count it out. All right, so this first one would be 1 pi over 4. And we've talked about this counting thing before. 2 pi over 4 would be up here, but 2 pi over 4 reduces to pi over 2. Okay. After 2 pi over 4, we would have 3 pi over 4. Then 4 pi over 4, right, which is pi. 5 pi over 4. 6 pi over 4 is 3 pi over 2. Okay. 7 pi over 4. And 8 pi over 4, which is 2 pi. So get those ones labeled first. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do the pi over 6 and the pi over 3 together. Okay, because the pi's over 6's reduced to pi's over 3. All right. So I'm going to add in my other lines that I need for that. So you're adding in 4 more lines. Basically, kind of, it's not quite a half split, but it's not going to matter for if you're trying to take a test off of this, right? All you need is the radian measures on there in the right order. Okay, so the perfection of it, like we did with the protractor, when we broke out the protractor to draw our other unit circles, doesn't have to be there when you're taking a test. Okay? Okay, so our first one would be 1 pi over 6, or pi over 6. This next one is 2 pi over 6. 2 pi over 6 reduces to what? Pi over 3. Okay, so we're doing some fraction work in our head. So this is pi over 6, 2 pi over 6. 3 pi over 6 is the pi over 2. So then 4 pi over 6 would go here. What's 4 pi over 6 reduced to? 2 pi over 3. So we can count everything. Okay, so we're up to 4 pi over 6. Next would be 5 pi over 6, doesn't reduce. And this is a good checkpoint, right? 6 pi over 6 should land here, and it should be really easy to check. Oops, sorry, because it's 1, right? Or so it's just pi. The next one's 7 pi over 6. What's 8 pi over 6 reduced to? 4 pi over 3, good. So that was 8 pi over 6. 9 pi over 6 is the 3 pi over 2. Then we've got 10 pi over 6. What's 10 pi over 6? 5 pi over 3. And then 11 pi over 6 would go here. And then finally 12 pi over 6 would be 2 pi. Okay? That's just getting the radian measures on there. Okay? For the most part, hopefully we've used the unit circle enough that I know in AP Calc, my students do not write the radian measures out. We're going to have you do that to get used to this when we're taking the tests, okay, on these there's little quizzes on these. But as far as you know kind of the basic, hopefully the basic order that they're in quadrants there, okay? All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to label the coordinates, all right? And I start with my quadrant angle coordinates, all right? I know that it's always cosine, comma, sine. That's not a bad thing to write down when you're taking a test. Just to remind yourself. I know this first coordinate is 1, 0. I don't care where you write it, inside, outside. You pick. Okay. So we know we're out 1, up 0. That's where I always start. Okay. Then this one up here is out 0, up 1. And then this one is out -1, up 0. And this one down here is out 0, down 1. I accidentally hit the button too fast. After that, I fill in all my parentheses. Now, if you're taking a timed test, are you going to fill in all those parentheses? No. Okay. You're just going to write the coordinates down. Okay. So go ahead. I want you today, go ahead and fill in the parentheses so you get it looking nice on this first one. Okay. Because when we do these little quizzes, they'll be timed. And we'll probably start at like 8 or 10 minutes and then we'll reduce it. Okay. Because you basically have to get it down that you can get this thing set up, at least with the coordinates on it, not necessarily the radian measures, in about 2 minutes or less. Because I give you a 16 to 20 question test plus the unit circle. I don't grade the unit circle part, but you need it to take the test when we do AP Calc. Okay? It's the first place we start the year. All right, the rest of this is easy as 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's how you got to remember, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to count. See how that's 0 right here? I'm going to count up. 1, 2, 3. Nice trick, right? All right, so write that down. You count up from the 0 coordinate. So that's all going in the y's. Okay? So you find the 0. Now I'm going to look here at the 0. The 0's in the x spot, so I'm going to count down. 1, 2, 3. Okay? All right, what do they all get divided by? 2. So divide them all by 2. Now, if I'm an AP Calc, I probably don't even worry about the divide by 2. I know I just write that down in my answer. Okay? You guys, let's get the divide by 2 in still. Okay? And then, technically, they all get radical signs. But what's the square root of 1? 1. So I don't need a radical sign on the 1. So everything that's not a 1 gets a radical sign. And I now have my first quadrant set up. Okay, when I'm doing these problems, you guys, I just literally write, I find my 1, 0, I write 1, 2, 3, and then whichever coordinate I need, I write the other part of it. Because I know if it's a 3, the other one has to be a 1, right? The 2's match. If it's a 1, the other one has to be a 3. Okay? All right, let's set this side up. So if I'm starting from that 0, the 0's are going in the x's, I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3. And if I start with this 0, I'm going to count up. 1, 2, 3. What are we going to divide by? 2. So divide them all by 2. What's the next step? Anything that's not a 1 gets a radical. There's an extra step in every quadrant, though, that's not the first quadrant. Because we've got negatives, right? Do the negatives go on the x coordinate or the y coordinate in quadrant 2? The cosine the x. That's right. Good job. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do quadrant 3 now. So I'm looking at that 0 right there. I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3. So I started with my y. I counted down 1, 2, 3. What about my... I'm going to go from this x right here, and I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3. Is it important that you make sure that these quadrant ones are correct? Everything is based on those quadrant ones. So make sure when you write those ones out, you write them out correctly. Okay, again, I had a student think about this one as positive 10, and that one is negative 10. Okay. All right, what are we going to divide by? Divide everything by 2. Radical on everything but 1. Where do the negatives go in quadrant 3? On all of them. Okay. All right, let's look at this one right here. Okay, so I'm going to go up from my x coordinate. I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to go from the y coordinate, go down 1, 2, 3. And then divide by 2. Radical on everything that's not a 1. Oh, it's slow on that one. All right, and then where do the negatives go this time? Y. On the y, because the cosine is positive. And you've got it. Okay? So here's what you're going to do for homework. All right? You're going to, I don't want you to look at it. I want you to try to do it from memory. All right? So I want you to practice that 3 times. Okay? That's all I'm asking for the homework assignment. That's a pretty easy homework assignment. Okay? But you've got to practice it 3 times. And like I said, we're probably not going to test on this week. We might give a little quiz middle of next week. Okay? Then the next part of this, you guys can go ahead and open the Chromebooks. Okay? So I'm going to show you where the other part is. Let me make sure I published it. Hang on. To get into haiku. Oh, I did. It's there. Okay. And I got to go to ABC, or math analysis. So I'm going to give you the rest of the period to work, okay, since we've done that little part. And I know we've got people, I know the juniors, you guys are SBAC testing today. I don't want to stress you out too much. It's just important to do as well in English as you did in math, right? If not better. Okay. All right, so right in here is your study guide, right? Which you have to have done before when? Friday is when I'm going to go over it. What I did was I linked where last year's video was, okay?